This is a Curvy 3D for costume tutorial where I show you how I made the costume for this fantasy Barbarian. Here's the final model in Curvy. I started this model by sketching a simple mannequin. It's made out of curves, so you can edit each part dynamically. Each part's only got 3 or 4 lines, some of them only 2. It's all very easy to sketch and edit. Then you can rotate them into place to make a pose. Here's the posed character. I find it easier to sculpt in pose. Here's the merged and sculpted character. I'm going to show you how to make the clothing details on this character. The shirt, the drapes, the chains and the beads. So first, the shirt. We're going to pick a good angle and use slice by curve. I'm going to duplicate the body using Ctrl D. Hide the original, and then use slice by curve. This creates an action on our object with these options, and now we need to draw a curve for it to slice with. So pick Curve Tools and Add Curve. Then we can draw over the mesh to make a curve to define where we're going to slice through the mesh to cut out a piece for the shirt. Now this curve is fully editable like the other curves earlier, so you can use all the curve smoothing and the rulers to tidy it up. Now at the moment, by default, the selection won't go through to the back, whereas now we do want it to go through to the back, so we turn off the front faces only option. And now it's sliced through the mesh. When you're finished, click Bake Action. And this hasn't just selected an area of the mesh, it's actually cut new triangles into the mesh to make a smooth edge. Now we need this piece separated, so we're going to use Mesh Detach. This splits the selected from the unselected bits, so we get rid of the unselected bits, and we have the new piece. At the moment this is taking up the same space as the original skin, so there's a bit of fighting as the two things overlap. So with a very low intensity I'm going to use the Add brush just to pull the surface on top of the underlying skin. Now I'm going to use the clay brush just to fill in a bit as if the fabric is tighter. And now we can sculpt details into this mesh. Using the clay brush and the Add brush. To get more detail, you can convert it to a dynamic mesh object by pressing J. If you want to tidy up the edges again, we can select the whole mesh and relax and smooth near the boundary on the mesh tools. So it smooths near the edge of the masked area. So that's the shirt, and the same is done on the other side, of course. Now for a quicker version of the same idea, we can just use the Lasso tool to pick out an area of the mesh we want to keep. This isn't editable, it's like with the curves as before, but it's a quick way to do it. Again, we can relax the boundary to smooth out the boundary to get a sort of smarter shape. And in this case, I'm not going to use detach, I'm just going to invert the selection and delete the faces by pressing delete. Again, we now have a new mesh ready for sculpting. And that gives the finished part of the skirt. Just rename the parts as we go. It's always good practice. Next, we're going to do this bit of cloth and this tag coming down off the front of the belt. There's the cloth and the tag. Both of these are lathe objects. So the lathe, we draw along the length of the lathe first. And for the top, we're going to draw a very wiggly curve. With lots of folds in it. I'm going to rotate that into place, flatten it out. Now we can see the folds happening on the lathe. I'm going to clone that curve with curve clone, and then I'm going to shrink on the z-axis to flatten out that curve, so we have lots of ripples at the top of the cloth and it's pretty smooth at the bottom of the cloth. I'm using soft move just to shape the curves a bit. Using redraw smooth curve to tidy up any curves. The curve rulers are very useful for reshaping small parts of a curve. And now the tag. Again, we're going to draw with a lathe along the length of the object. Then draw a top and a bottom. Use the rulers to tidy it up. Just tweak it into position. Now this piece is meant to be a thick piece of leather, so we can add some depth and adjust the bevel to turn it into a thicker piece. It's not very interesting being completely flat, so I'm going to just slightly shape the top and bottom to give it a bit of a curve. So I'm going to pull the top out and push the bottom in. This will give it a slightly curved surface, which catches the light in a better way. Next, I'm going to do the beads. The beads are just lines, but they wrap around the body closely. Now you could wrap these by hand, but there's an easy tool for wrapping them automatically called Drop to Surface. So So we're going to draw a curve, a line over the body. And just change the width of that. Now, for dropped surface, it needs to be above the surface to start off with. So I'm moving the curve above the body. Just smooth it out with the redraw as smooth curve. And then dropped surface. When we turn the view, you can see that everything above the body has been dropped. And we have some scraggy ends, which we can trip off with the scissor tool. And now this line maps onto the body. It's not quite as long as we'd want going around the body, so I'm going to drag those out by hand. And just tweak the surface to match nicely. Now to make the beaded effect, I'm going to add a curvy map and use a low intensity. Right click on the slider to type in an intensity and use the panel's texture placement panel to change the repeat. So it's a very simple map, it's just repeating lots of times for each bead. And add on a material. So I did the same for all the beads. Next, the chain. So we need to start with a torus to make a chain link. And a torus and curvy is just a loop. And we use the redraw as circle arc to redraw as a nice neat circle. Use closed loop to close the loop in the object properties. Just reduce the mesh a little bit because these are going to be very little on the scene. They don't need a lot of mesh. I'm going to press K to convert into a mesh from a curve primitive into a mesh. Now you use the rectangular mask to select the bottom, drag it down into a chain link shape. Now we need lots and lots of these links to make a chain. So I'm going to use Control D to duplicate a link, move it down into place. I'm going to rotate it. At the moment I've got smooth rotation on, I want snap rotation. There we go. If I select the two of them, I can do mesh join to put them into one object. And then repeat the process to make more links. Control D, move, join. Each time is doubling the length of the chain, so we're going to get there quite quickly. When we have our finished chain, we want to make a duplicate, a copy. which we're going to then use the fit to rails action on. So use fit to rails, you draw one rail along the original object, and then you draw a second rail where you want the object to be displaced to. Again, these curves are editable, so we can place them where we want on the mesh. You can see that the new chain is following the line of the curve. And we can use all of the curve tools to smooth out parts of the curve. I've now duplicated that action, and I'm going to mirror it. Unfortunately, the original curve has now moved off the chain, so to make the action work we need to move the original curve back on top of the chain. So just line that up with the original chain again. Now we can make as many chains as we like with the same method. I'm going to duplicate once more and drag on another curve, another chain. Again, using the smooth rulers and the soft move tool to drag them into place. When we're done, we use bake action to turn them into normal meshes again. We can still edit them as normal meshes using the soft move tool and drag the mesh around to make any final tweaks. And that's the chains. And here's the final model again, with the clothes and the detailing. And here's the final render in Blender.